Hi, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me very much. Pleasure to be here.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for your patience. Obviously, with Shana being ill, we had to postpone the last arrangement we had, but we're here now, so we're delighted to get it on the road. It's quite an off-the-wall subject, this. I know. I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners, they've rolled their eyes and they've gone, "Oh, God, what's all this about?" And it's not the sort of thing that you'd say that you'd learn in high school or anything like that. But it's very interesting, and I've heard a lot of people on the street sort of talking about it and are very intrigued with it. Could you give us a rundown of how you got interested in the subject, and to just sort of start us off with it, what inspired you to get into it all?
Sure. I started out trying to debunk it. I had looked at just about every conspiracy. It started last summer, 2014. Middle of the summer, I had gone through, just about every garden variety conspiracy you could think of. And this thing had crossed my desk more times than I could count. And I just looked at it like everyone who's probably listening, saying, this is ridiculous. This is silly. And I knew there was something strange about it, because the first time I clicked on it, I actually got physically embarrassed. I actually got flushed. Because you're talking to a guy that's looked into lizard people and every secret society and everything you could ever think of, and I'm clicking on this and I'm going, why am I embarrassed to click on this? This doesn't even make sense. And once I started digging into it, I spent about 9 months debunking it, trying to tear it apart, basically trying to prove the globe. Basically trying to prove it's like, okay, we live on where they tell us that we live, where NASA tells us and all the space agencies that we live on a spinning ball that's flying through space. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized that there was something very, very wrong. It turned into a Pandora's box, where the more threads I pulled on, the more things opened up. And to the point where what happened was, in February, I just gave up. I physically gave up. I woke up in the middle of the night, the second week of February this year, and had the narrative in my head for the whole thing. I just said, you know what, I've got it. I've got the clues pretty much right there. And day after day, because it took about a day to do each clue from bare bones to finished thing on YouTube. And I made the intro and the first 7 clues in 8 days. Just, bam, 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 bam. And really didn't think much of it, because I turned off, I did everything not to make it popular on YouTube. I didn't monetize it. I didn't allow ratings. I didn't allow comments. I didn't think it was going to get any traction. And then almost immediately I had people calling me, and the interviews started coming in. And what was really great about it was, not only were people starting to do their own videos on the topic, but all the interviewers that were talking to me, nobody could debunk it. So here we are, June, and nobody shot this thing down. And it's amazing, because the internet hive mind, in my opinion, misses nothing.
Okay, well, you've got a website, Enclosed World, so our listeners can always check out that website to find out the details of this theory. But could you give us a rundown of so what is the general theory, and what is it?
The general theory is that it's very possible that we live inside, if anyone's seen The Truman Show, because that's the easiest one to swallow, is it possible that we live in a Truman Show? That's, The Truman Show was only about 20 miles wide in the movie, and if you expanded it out to a few thousand miles wide, could you, because, in the movie you only had to fool one person, could you fool an entire civilization, and how long could you keep that going? And from the research that I did and all the stuff that I read up on and watched what the governments did, especially since 1956, I think it's possible to have done it. And that our governments, not only our governments, but the United States and Russia were the first people to find it in 1956, and I think it's been kept a secret ever since. I think we've known about it for the last 60 years, and they've been doing everything they can to keep it from the public, including the creation of NASA, the Antarctic Treaty, just all these little things that just keep pointing back to the same concept, which is the world is not what you think it is.
So the world is flat, and how comes we're not going off the edge of it? I mean, that's the main question, isn't it? Why haven't we fallen off the edge?
Well, the old story from hundreds and hundreds of years ago. If it is tabletop flat, and there is a bunch of disputes in the flat Earth community, believe it or not, is it tabletop flat, or is it enclosed, or are there warps in it? And the reason why you would never fall off the edge is because if it is enclosed, if it is a flattish system, then Antarctica is not what you think it is. Antarctica isn't just a continent that looks kind of like Australia, but with snow on it. It is actually stretched around the entire edge of a circular map, and it forms what appears to be a giant ice barrier that starts out, with 200-foot high cliffs and then ramps up to 10,000 feet, which is, roughly 2 miles, plateaus at 2 miles, and just keeps going for a long, long stretch with no animal life, no plant life. It's the perfect barrier that nobody wants to go to. And again, you want coincidences. The fact that Antarctica was sealed off in 1959 by the Antarctic Treaty, which says that no corporation anywhere in the world, no matter how much money, no matter how much they lobby, they can't even talk about it. No corporation is allowed into Antarctica, and they haven't been ever since it was explored, ever since the big United States mission, Operation Deep Freeze in 1956. But that's why nothing falls off the edge, because you can't. The water is held in by a giant barrier, an ice continent.
Okay, and then so I'm kind of thinking of trying to throw things in here. What about people that have flown remember when Concords were about, and when you were so high up, you could actually look out the window and you can see the globe of the Earth. How would that be explained?
The curvature of the Earth. Excellent question. People will mention that all the time, and you can go on YouTube and check out the videos, not just from planes, because people take videos out of planes all the time, but look at the weather balloons that have been gone up since the last few years. Especially compare like the Red Bull one, which got a lot of media attention just this year, which showed with a fisheye lens a severe over-exaggerated curve of the Earth, versus the dog cam video, and I think that might have been even I don't know if that was a UK one or not. The dog cam weather balloon that went up, which showed nothing, no curve at all. It was perfectly flat, and it was within 10,000 feet of the Red Bull altitude. One was about 110,000 feet. The Red Bull was 120,000 feet. Bottom line, if people are taking a picture outside their airplane window and they think they see a curve, fine, take that picture, put it on your PC, whatever it is, your laptop, and then take a ruler or a piece of paper and show me where the curve is, because it's not there. You want to see the curve. Believe me when I tell you this. This is the greatest conditioning of all time. It's the greatest con of all time. And what I mean by that is we're conditioned since grade school, and I don't know what you call it over there, but you put a globe in the classroom when you're 6 years old, and that's all you have to do. You don't even have to talk about it. You just leave it there. And by the time you get out of school, even without college, you are conditioned to, that is where you live, and we equate it with things that are absolutely obvious. We know that fire burns, water is wet, you drop a pencil, it will fall because of gravity. But we also equate the Earth, the shape of the Earth, with these things, even though there's a very, very small group of people that can prove it. And the biggest one is NASA.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about NASA myself, because it does seem to be very secretive sometimes. I'll say that. What about the planets? We can look up the sky. We can see the stars. We can see the moon, the sun. They look circular. They look round. Are they not there, or are they genuine?
They're there, but they're not what we think they are, not by any stretch. In any flat Earth model or enclosed system model, and in fact my model, the sun is not 92 million miles away. The moon is not 237,000 miles away. The stars and the planets, but they're broken up into two sections, and that is, in an enclosed system like the one I'm proposing, Truman Show, it is a giant planetarium that we are born into, and why would we ever doubt it? So the stars and the planets are just a gorgeously rendered image, probably the best planetarium that's ever been devised ever. We can do this sort of thing on a smaller scale. The sun and the moon are a little tougher, because you don't necessarily want to make them part of the backdrop, because they're way larger in the sky and they do a lot more things. So you basically make the sun in a system like this not very wide at all, less than 100 miles wide. Same with the moon. Make the sun its own light source, like a giant light bulb, like a terrarium light bulb or a cage light bulb, and the moon a giant night light. Because the moon is the most photographed object of all time. The sun, is the most adored object of all time. So you'd want to put a little more care into the design of that.
And I take it you don't think we went to the moon then?
Oh my God. No, I'll take it one further. And I know that this is part of the problem when people are trying to grasp this concept, because especially in the conspiracy world, because the conspiracy world, the Apollo landings from the United States standpoint have been so dismantled ever since the internet, really got online, that most conspiracy people say, no, we don't believe we went to the moon. But when you say, okay, what about the ISS? What about satellites? What about these things that, especially the ISS, because it's the same group. It's like, okay, can you trust one thing and, can you dismiss one thing but hold on to another thing? Can you say that the Apollo thing didn't happen but still held on to the ISS? Because look, if they're going to lie about one thing, they're going to lie about another. I'll take it one for it, because you're out in what, London? Right now?
London, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Ask yourself this: with all the other space programs that have happened around the world, Russia and America were the first one. Japan had the JAXA program. China. Why didn't England ever get tied into this? Why didn't England ever get dragged into this? And I know why. And that was because they were smarter than just about everybody else. When this thing goes down, they're going to look like princes by comparison, because I think when they looked at it, and look, I'll even look at the what was it, Diamonds Are Forever, James Bond, 1971.
Oh yeah,
1972, where he's running across an American soundstage and they're faking the moon mission, and the astronauts can't catch them because they're running in slow motion. They're still in character. I think England stayed out of the space program because there was too much pride, too much dignity, where they said, you know what, we're not even going to touch this. Whether you want to waste your money throwing rockets into space, you can go do it all day long. And they have the tech, they've got the willpower to do it. Never touched it. I love that.
Okay, well, so we come down to the big question now. Then is it a natural construct? Is that what you're saying, or are we in some kind of zoo project? Like the Truman Show,
Yeah, that depends on. I'm trying to take the more benevolent, non-sinister approach, because lots of people have mentioned, Prison Planet, The Matrix. Are we an experiment? Are we a petri dish? Are we a snow globe on somebody's desk? I would like to say, but no matter what they mention, everybody says it's artificial. No question, it's not a natural process. We are in a mechanism. We are in a giant, beautiful terrarium, in my opinion. If anyone has any doubt of that, because just look at how it was built. The first thing it was, the systems were designed, everything that was put in place in a system like this was designed to slow our system down to where we couldn't explore very fast, and there were a lot of very subtle negative reinforcement barriers put in, like increasing the cold temperature out to where you got to Antarctica. And even if you got out there, you're not going to live there. There's no plant or animal life to speak of. Altitudes, we live in a very, very narrow band of altitude. 95% of the population lives from sea level to 5,000 feet. Everything but the rest of the planet is very, very beautiful. And the edges have been hidden from us entirely. We don't know it. That's the great con here. This is the great magic trick. We don't know. That's why we act naturally, and we don't ever question. And the big reason for that is, and I talked about this in one of the clues, was if we knew there was a fence, every other life form on this planet could care less. It's like they'd notice it. They'd notice there was a barrier, but it wouldn't obsess them. We would dwell on it. We would dedicate our lives to trying to figure out, new religions would pop up. All we would do is just throw everything we had at trying to figure out who built this place and why. And again, whoever built this place and why does not want us to do that. They want us to just go about our lives and our daily business for whatever reason. So do I think it's sinister? No. Do I think we're being trapped and tortured? Yeah, there's a lot of suffering in the world, but the most of it seems to be what we do to each other.
Yeah, one thing I suppose a lot of our listeners will be thinking is the scale of it. So let's look at NASA.
Yeah.
And a lot of people at NASA have got projects putting satellites up there. Yeah. Creating these satellites so the technology works, so it can do whatever it needs to do in space. Do you think that would these people that work at NASA, would they have to be lying for all this to work, or are they tricked as well? It's kind of opens a can of worms, isn't it?
Yeah, well, most of them don't, and I'll give you a couple examples from a high level standpoint. People Because the NASA's a wing of the United States military. People think it's its own entity. It is not. It is the United States military. It's built on military technology. If you compartmentalize something well enough, and that's what the military does, most people don't have to be in the loop. You can have people that build satellites all day long. You don't have to tell them. The people that are in the control rooms, you don't have to tell them. You can just send fake telemetry data. The people that create that telemetry data, yes, they have to know. But that's a very, very small group of people. I'll give you an example. One of my neighbors who moved recently, I'm out here in Colorado. He was career NASA. His name was Wayne Ottinger. And he was the engineer, the guy, when it came to building a lot of the astronaut stuff for Gemini and Mercury and the Apollo programs. And his walls were just bristling with plaques. He was career JPL, and he was absolutely, as high up as you could go for a NASA engineer. He knew nothing. He absolutely knew nothing. And that's because why would you tell the garage mechanic? As a matter of fact, I'll throw it the other way. It's like, who do you tell in this? The people that are like, even the people that are faking the interior footage of the ISS, you don't have to tell them. They're Air Force employees. You just make them sign the standard non-disclosure agreement saying, look, you don't have clearance. Now, they will know that they're faking something, because obviously their footage is being used as the real thing. Same thing with the underwater footage that's in the simulators that's being passed off as the real thing. But you don't have to tell them why it's happening. Just like, look, we're paying you to basically not ask questions, so don't do it. But that the contrast to that is the Apollo astronauts, back in the early days, I think they told them, and those guys, and there's the reason why you don't tell people like that anymore, because they ended up being train wrecks. They became recluses. They crawled into a bottle, and they led very unhappy lives.
Okay, well, Shana, what are you making of all this? It's interesting stuff, isn't it?
It's definitely interesting, especially with some of the different things that are coming out in the media right now. Everything from, specifically, I wanted to ask about the weather patterns and climate change, and how we would be able to have the technology to manipulate that within the enclosed Earth theory. As such, you would also be able to use that as, I would say, a distraction method for people to not pay attention to the idea that, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, but look at what he's doing. Yeah. Kind of thing. So what would your...
The weather systems, it's really, really interesting, because in a system like this, especially if it's enclosed, you would have a lot of automated processes, from the jet stream, which would be part of the system, the underwater conveyor system, the magma system. But it seems that our technology, especially in the last, say, 20 years or so, we have developed the ability to alter, and I'm just going to pick on HARP here because it's an American system and everybody's been suspicious of it since it was created. But it's like, look, we seem to be able to control things or alter things on a local level, but that has some sort of blowback. And that is, if you mess with an artificial system that has all sorts of complex algorithms that are going on in it, and you say, okay, create a hurricane here, put a typhoon here, make a lot of rainfall here, the system is going to try to compensate. And I believe that the climate change and all the weird patterns that we've been running into recently has been partially due to a backlash of the automated system fighting with what we have been messing with naturally. And of course, we're not going to tell the public that, it's like, any experimental program, especially with weather modification, we're not going to say that. But I do think it's tied to it, which is why, they're saying that climate change, everything in media, in the mainstream, you got to question. And the climate change, the thing is happening. I think it's a cover for, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, that's a side effect of when we do something on a regional level.
Makes sense. Would you say that because you have experience as a proprietary software engineer as part of your experience in Colorado, would that color some of your perspective on how you created the enclosed Earth theory, just being able to work with video games and some of the AI elements that have come across over the last 20 years?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that's exactly how I went looking at this thing. Because once I started digging into it, I realized from a design standpoint, because I was trying to figure out if I had to build this thing, and that's when I got into Clue 6. I was talking about how the system, how it was designed from a top down view, and it was flawless. The design, again, not just the negative reinforcements, but the little subtle things like putting a 3% salt solution in the oceans that restricts older ocean travel as far as discoveries and explorations by 95% at least, because you can't drink what you're sailing on. That was brilliant. Lumping all the continents at the center. And it looked to me also when I was looking at this that we've gone through different versions. We're not the first occupants in this apartment by any stretch. There have been previous versions. For anyone who has any doubt of that, look at the old Pangea supercontinent model where, people say, well, wasn't it a point where all the continents were lumped together? Yeah, they absolutely were lumped together. But in an enclosed flat system, that makes way more sense because you just put them at the center and then you can kind of break them apart as you get going. But if it's on a globe, it throws everything off because it doesn't make any sense. You have a big lumpy continent and then the rest is just water, and then what? It just kind of spreads out like that? Nah, not buying it. So yeah, from a design standpoint, every system that I looked at worked better in a flat enclosed system than it did on a globe. And that means everything from the jet stream to the underwater conveyors to the magma systems. Everything worked better. So.
And that was something too, the generational element that I believe you went into one of the flat Earth clues, wherein if you look at the forgetting of a certain genetic awareness for people, you go through thousands and thousands of years, and even the five major religions that you go into have views and perspectives. Especially, I would say the Native American culture has a lot of stories about we're in the fifth or sixth version or run through of humanity. So for every time that happens, you lose a little bit more of the story. So would that be? Could you then assume that that first generation was aware, or certain people of that first generation were aware? They kind of signed the non-disclosure agreement with the architects, and it trickled down from there to the point that we are completely oblivious at this point.
Yeah, and that was another excellent question. You get some good ones. I don't know if you've wrote these down ahead of time, but these are good. There's been a lot of questions posed to me. At least half of the people that email me from a religious standpoint, and all faiths have contacted me, and by that I mean the big five: Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And they've all got their different take on this. But the question comes up more often than I would have thought, and that is what was version 1.0? Who were they? And were they in on it? And I think they were at one point where, and I touched on the Christian Tower of Babel story. Now, I didn't mention it by name, of course, but there was that thing. And that is, if you had a unified civilization and they found out, and again, this comes to the core of why you would have to keep it hidden from the civilization. And that is, if you had a civilization that knew and didn't have much division, if they were a unified group, what would they do if they found out? And it's like, well, if they had advanced enough technology, they'd probably try to get out, or at least try to alter the structure, or go to meet their maker or builder or creator, or whatever you want to call this. And that was fascinating to me. That, and of course, what you were talking about, the lost knowledge, where we seem to go through these big gaps where we have to rediscover everything. Our civilization, our history unbroken only goes back 5,000 years. That is not a long time. But in those 5,000 years, I also find it very interesting that the first 4,500 years, the majority of every government, every tribe, every culture, every religion all believed in the same thing. And that was, we were living on a flattish structure, which was enclosed by some sort of physical barrier. The Christians called it a firmament. The other religions had their own terms for it. The vault of the sky, that we were in the back of something. It was all that we were in one giant community. And that didn't change until 500 years ago. And that's when, it became a globe. And I think it bought the powers that be and the creators, I think, even let it happen another 500 years until we've got to this point now where, for whatever reason, in 2015, this is the debatable topic, and it's getting a ton of traction.
Now, before I throw this back to our resident pagan, because I'm sure that he's going to want to add some of his views on there as well, I wanted to ask, you had mentioned also that something like 8 years of nuclear experiments happened on a regular basis, where once Admiral Byrd had gone to Antarctica a couple of times and had the interview where he discussed how in Antarctica we had all of these amazing core deposits of coal and uranium and all of these different things, and then everything just stopped. At that point, the nuclear experiments happened where they were just shooting rockets and cannons and things. And now we actually have what's been getting a lot of attention is the space junk, and how in a couple of years it's going to be impossible for people to go out to space, regardless of, if they could or not, because of the amount of space junk that's out there. Do you think that and last question here before I throw it back to Paul, but is it possible that we can see through the enclosure, going back to some of the different elements, the planetary elements, things that we see? Is it possible that it's more of like a two-way mirror structure in that technology that is creating the enclosure?
You mean the enclosure itself? Can we see outside of it, or people can see inside of it, or?
Both. Is it possible that at a certain point, either we were able to see through it, or that obviously we're under some sort of surveillance? Maybe, or else why would they create it?
Absolutely. We are under constant surveillance, and that is part of when I was digging into the end part of the clues, which is like, look, if and when, and I firmly believe it will be a when this thing comes out, and there is a risk of, we don't know what the builders will do when this happens, because if too many people find out, then, they've got to make a decision. But yeah, if you are being watched, and I do think we're being watched, then, and you're being watched absolutely for a fact, then you become more accountable. And now, do I think we had the ability to look outside it ever? Maybe the first version people did, version 1.0, but that didn't end as well as they had hoped. So, I absolutely know for a fact that we're being tracked on the inside of this thing. You wouldn't build a structure as advanced as well as this thing has been. I mean, it is perfect, or the closest thing to perfect I could ever think of. And if you wouldn't build it that well without having the ability to monitor everybody and everything inside it. It's not an open system, if that's what you're asking. I think you are.
So you're saying that it's not so much like The Sims on autopilot as it is that there is somebody kind of watching and checking the boxes in a scientific.
I would hope so, because people have asked me, and it's like, what would you compare this to? And at one point I said, it was kind of like maybe we're just a box of kittens where, we're being taken care of. But at the same time I was going, no, that's not the best analogy. I think we're more like a box of baby scorpions. And that is, we're kind of cute, kind of cuddly, but you do not want us. One, you don't want to be reaching your hand in there. And two, you do not want us getting out, and people have said, well, why does there have to be a dome? And it's like, are you kidding? Have you seen what we do on a regular basis? We've been touching on this since in the movies since the 50s. We're dangerous right now. Maybe we'll evolve, but it's going to take a big consciousness uptick before they're going to let us start running around on our own.
Yeah, I think the human element is still in its own very self-destructive toddler phase. So I wouldn't want us loose on the rest of the universe myself. But that's and not to pander to you, but I've said this in other interviews, and that is, look, women have it way. They are way better at handling this sort of thing than men. It's the men that are the big problem. You don't see women, starting wars and committing, atrocities, to that degree. So I'm still going to put most of the blame on the men. Sorry. Sorry, men who are listening. I'm okay with that, but I would like to hear what Paul, are you still with us there?
Yeah, I'm taking it all in. There's a couple of the points that's kind of just sticking in my head. The first one is, with regards to the North and South Poles being sort of these great big walls, that's very interesting and kind of makes you think of it. But then thing that gets me is the equator. Where we've got the line. I mean, I don't know if has anyone ever travelled through the equator and gone around, because obviously that's the test, to go from the centre of the equator and walk all the way around and come back to the same point again. Have you got a theory against that, or?
Oh, no. You can sail. Talk about, I think, Galileo or the others. You can sail around the world, but you're just making one big circle on a flat map. You're not going to be able to tell the difference. The distances are so vast, especially in the old days, where you either make a big left hand turn or a big right hand turn, but you'd never ever know it. But once GPS was put into place in the 90s. All that went out the window, because remember, the GPS system, again, stands for Global Positioning System, was designed by the United States military. And I have no doubt that one of the primary reasons for the even creation of the GPS system, which of course has a massive, massive gap in coverage in the Southern Hemisphere, which it shouldn't if it's a globe, the GPS system was designed to help protect this thing. There's been a lot of money spent on a lot of different areas. And I know the United States is primary. The Russia would be secondary on this. A lot of money has been spent to keep this thing a secret from us.
That's an interesting answer. And then there's also the Hollow Earth theories. Have you looked into that side of stuff? Does that complement it?
Yeah. And I don't hate the Hollow Earth theory at all, mostly because the same guy that is tied to this theory, the big guy, is tied to the Hollow Earth theory. And that was Admiral Richard Byrd, the youngest United States admiral in the history of our Navy and our greatest living explorer, at least over the United States. And he discovered he did the North Pole expedition in 1926. And supposedly his secret diaries talked about that there was a hollow earth, entrance up at the North Pole, in a flat map, it'd just be the center, it'd be a hole in the center, not very big. And that he flew into it. And there was another, like a journey to the center of the earth type of thing, where there's another civilization and tropical stuff. No, it doesn't conflict with my model at all. It just makes it a little smaller. So you don't have this giant hollow sphere. It's just a hollow, big cavey area. But again, what was more interesting for me was that even though he did the North Pole in 1926, he spent the rest of his life, all the way up until his death in 1957, in Antarctica. Mission after mission, like he was looking for something, and that's where what Shauna was saying. It got really, really weird, because he was looking for. He just went major expedition after major expedition until 1954, where it looked like they just gave up. Where they were like, okay, maybe the old maps, the ancient maps, the secret maps are wrong. And he goes on national television over here in the States, and he says, look, the Antarctica is made out of money. Let's carve this thing up. And all the countries are going, yeah, let's do that. And then he goes down for one more expedition, and then the world changed. And nobody talks about it. Everything changed. Everyone left the ice like their lives depended on it. A treaty was put in place. There's literally, you can look this up. It's called the Antarctic Defense Force, manned by multiple nations, top of the line military equipment. You aren't allowed. There's only like 5,000 people technically on the entire continent down there. It's all military and science. All corporations were banned for it. It goes against everything that we are as and you can say what you want about different countries, but we are a capitalistic civilization. It goes against everything that we are. We do everything based on money and greed and power. Yeah. What conspiracy is bigger than money? I'd like to see someone top this one, because that was the big one. And then, of course, the creation of NASA in 1958 and sealing off. And the fact, I'll throw one more. I know I don't want to ramble too much here. That's okay. But the fact that if you believe in coincidences, and I don't, the fact that the Valin radiation belts were announced by NASA in 1959, the same year you seal off Antarctica. If it was one of those two things, I might have let it pass. But from a design standpoint, you're sealing off the outer edge and the upper edge at the same time. That is structure. There is nothing else that could be for me. It's like, again, if you just did the outer edge and then maybe several years later, but no. And the fact that NASA was the ones that announced it. And, but anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think one thing that we can definitely take from all this is I think that when we think about where we're all living, sometimes I think we think we're freer than we are in terms of society. For example, you can't create something that can fly and just jump in it and fly it in the sky. You'd have to get a license. You'd have to do this or do that. You can't get a car and drive. You know, we are quite restricted. It's obviously, there's so much space around us, and we're so busy with our jobs, and we're so busy doing this and busy doing that. Excuse me. That we think we're free. Like, it's free for us to have a weekend where we can just go to the bar and have a few drinks and maybe go by the seaside, and that gives us a sense of freedom. But in regards to exploring the world freely and wherever we want, we're not very free at all. I mean, particularly with a lot of the problems with security and so on, with wars around the world and stuff. So I think it's very thought provoking. I mean, the whole concept you're coming up with here. I mean, it's one of the things. I mean, this is getting quite kind of deep into it. Is there? I mean, do you believe that we're still surrounded by space? For example, like this globe that we're in. Where is it sitting? Where is it?
I get that question every week, literally every week. And what I try to tell people is this: if you are faking space, yes, could there be space outside here? Yeah, sure. Why not? But you don't have to have space if you're faking it. As a matter of fact, if you're faking space, if it's a giant planetarium, you're probably faking space because there really isn't space outside. It's probably something much, much different. Could it be just blackness? Could it be, could we be underwater? I'll throw I don't want to quote too many biblical references, but the Genesis thing, the firmament that separates the waters above from the waters below. Could we be in a giant room with more of these, which other people have expressed, other flat earthers, and I totally dig that. It's like, because you're not going to build just one of this. There's going to be more. And the question is, are they right next to us like an egg crate? Or, are they spaced out to where there's a distance where we can't naturally travel from one to the other without help? Very, very possible. But for me, it would come down to efficiency. And that is, I would put them, if I was going to build them, I'd put them really close to each other and then make them, put a barrier so that, you couldn't travel from one place to the other, even though there might be spaceships that actually do that. But yeah, so to answer your question, yes, there could be space, but if it was me, I wouldn't do it. There's no need. There's no need to make space. If you can fake it and make sure that 99.99% of the population buys it. That's all you have to do.
There's one. I've just been trying on my computer trying to find. There was a movie that I saw quite a while ago, and it reminds me a little bit. Was it White City or something? It was
Dark City. Dark City.
That's right. Dark City. Yeah.
Dark City.
That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting because it's kind of. I mean, I was just going to say, whoever created that movie, maybe they know something.
Maybe there's been some weird predictive programming over the last 15 years, and people got to understand that predictive programming doesn't happen. Yeah, there's some short-term stuff, but there's a lot. This is big enough to where you can start talking about this decades in advance. Look at Dark City, which was 1998, because I know that was an Australian film or New Zealand film that actually the Matrix used some of the same sets.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Really thought-provoking.
Great movie. An enclosed system floating around in space on a much smaller scale. So it was just one city, but it was domed with an invisible force field. A very similar city to that was done in the 2014 movie The Signal, where you didn't find out till the very end. Spoilers for anyone who was watching that. It's a decent movie. The last 20 minutes are great. The Truman Show, 1998 as well.
Yeah.
Under the Dome, which just got picked up for another season, based on a Stephen King book. That's an American television series where it's a small town in Middle America that is enclosed by a physical glass impenetrable dome. The Simpsons movie, we'll throw some animation in there, where the entire city was enclosed. Springfield is enclosed by a giant dome. These little things, they are no accidents. I believe that because this thing was so big, there was a contingency plan put in place where they said, you know what? we're not going to be able to hide this thing forever. It's like hiding something from your roommates. You can hide, you can move stuff around every once in a while, use some sleight of hand here and there, but you can't hide this forever, especially when the technology gets to the point. I mean, thank God, like what you were saying, you know, where we're restricted in travel. Thank God we don't have flying cars, because that's the reason we don't. Yeah. It's never, ever going to happen, because they would be over within a day. You know, the fact that you have to, if you're going to even think about space travel, all the major space programs all over the world, they all go through NASA. NASA's the one that gives them the blueprints and how to do stuff. You know, the fact there's only 2 private space companies, and you know, one's Virgin Galactic, the other's SpaceX, and they just wrecked today. So there's another setback. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're sort of just pressing towards that time now. So before I give Shana a chance to come back in and say something again,
sure.
I'd just like to find out really, where do you want to be with? Where do you want to take all this? I mean, would you like to really dig in and try and find the truth? I mean, say in a year or so's time, where would you like to see yourself? What would you like to be doing with this info?
Oh yeah. At this point, you know, I got my own show, my own little radio show they threw at me right after my second interview on that particular network, called Strange World, and I'm really trying to promote everybody to not only ask questions, you know, and get the debunkers out there. That's the part that's great, is because the more people that look into this, and I love watching it happen, and you can see this on YouTube all day long, where people will say, they'll make a video because they're so outraged. They'll say, this is ridiculous. This is the silliest thing I've ever heard. And they'll do that for like 4 or 5 videos. It's like, this is stupid. This is stupid. This is stupid. And by the time they get to like the 5th or 6th video, all of a sudden they've turned the corner and they say, you know what? It's not stupid anymore. That's super fun. As far as personal goals for me, my personal goal, well, not only to tell people as much as I can, you know, and get the word out there, but my personal goal is to bring NASA down entirely. To get them to where there's so many questions coming from so many angles that I know they can't answer. I mean, I've got 4 or 5 points on them that they cannot debunk. I'm waiting for Neil deGrasse Tyson at this point, you know. Yeah. You know, but once they have enough questions, they're going to have to address it sooner or later. Either they're going to have to address it, or what I figure is going to happen is the United States government is going to stage some event that's so big that it'll distract from any other topic, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. Yeah, I
mean, I think anything that's funded by taxpayers' money, I think it should be really transparent, and I don't quite get that impression with NASA. I really don't. But Shana, have you got anything you'd like to throw in?
At this point, I would just say, you know, make sure that Mark gives us a heads up about the website, and if there's any other way that he can be contacted. Any plans for new videos to go into maybe the next step about, okay, people have accepted or at least are capable of wrapping their heads around the idea of the enclosed Earth. What's the next step?
Got it. First thing is, the website, which I had to build because, again, I didn't think this thing was going to get traction ever in a million years, enclosedworld.com. That's doing really well, and that's, you know, just a repository for all the videos, all the interviews, all the transcripts, if anyone wants to translate it in other languages, which has been fun to watch. As far as the further clues, I do have a couple more up my sleeve. I put out as the amount that I put out as quickly as I did. I'm trying to still let everything, you know, the dust settle and let things disperse, because, you know, the majority of the people still don't know. They still see it. It's like, you know, that it's still an unbelievable topic. But Clue 12, which is called Real Eyes, REAL space EYES, it goes into the fact that we not only are in an enclosed system, but we seems to be genetically designed to believe illusions, which is a fascinating little thing. And then 13, that's a secret. I'm not telling anybody what 13 is going to be. But yeah, I'm holding on to them. I want to get the same feeling I did before when I was doing the first ones. I want to wake up in the middle of the night with just, you know, this buzzing in my head, which is what happened before, and just put it out there. But for now, I'm just doing as many interviews as I can and helping other people, because people say, you know, what topic should I go on? And I go, you know what, run with this or run with this, and I'm just brainstorming with other people. And at this point, I cannot keep track. There's been like, what are we up to? Like 23,000 videos. I mean, a lot of them are mirrors on YouTube since this year, which is it was like a 600-700% increase in this topic just since February. So I'm just playing catch up now.
So is the topic of the architects or the authority, as you've put it before, and the people that are or had originally created the concept for the enclosed earth. Is that something that you think that you would get into, or is that more of the esoteric element?
I don't even really have to get into it, because there are people that are way better at it than me. I'll give a perfect example. Rob Skiba, who interviewed me and was initially a skeptic for Truth Frequency Radio, he went off after it, because this is what happens is this will stick in your head for a while. It starts rattling around, and eventually, like in his case, he was a very, very strong Christian. And so he started going down the biblical path, and he's done, 12 hours of different stuff that's been put out there, literally going chapter and verse on everything. So that's a whole nother sect. And I'm just letting they want to run with it. Hey, fine. That's fantastic. I don't have to do anything there. Because that side of it's already got a life of its own. They don't need any convincing. I just gave them the smallest of nudges. And I mean, I know the clue 11 was, clue 10 was called Hiding God, but I didn't think it would nearly get that sort of response. So yeah, that one's running on its own. Every once in a while, people will send me stuff, but no, that's a train that's running on a completely different track.
That's fantastic. I thank you so much for taking the time and doing the show with us today, Mark. I think this is an awesome concept that will really kind of break people's heads wide open, which is exactly what we need. So thank you so much. Yeah, no, it was an utter pleasure. Anything else I can answer?
I think I'm all out of questions on the spot there. I mean, it's as you say, it's a kind of thing that it sits and you sort of think, what about this and what about that, and you got to keep going for it. But I'll certainly sorry, go on.
Can I throw one more thing then?
Yeah, sure.
If you want something to rattle around people's head, because people say, if I have to introduce this to somebody as a new topic, what do I throw them at? It's like, yeah, fine. You want to mention the Truman Show, that's one thing. But if you want something physical, they can actually look themselves, ask them this. Say, fine, you think you live on the globe? Go online, any search engine, doesn't really matter, and find me 2 pictures of the Earth from space. Because I know you'll find one, but why is there only one? And, and you got to ask yourself, why would you hide that? And you'd only hide it because it's not what you think it is.
Yeah, I'd always encourage everyone to just always ask questions, even if you think it's wacky, even whatever. It's not the end of the world if you get something wrong anyway. If someone believes something and then finds out it's not true, or vice versa, it doesn't make you an idiot. It doesn't, I think it's really healthy being open-minded anyway. So that's my opinion, and it has been fascinating hearing all your research, Mark, and it'd be great if you could come back on the show at some point and tell us some more if you've got any more research on it and so on.
Love to. Yeah. There's tests being done as we speak. Laser tests in the works by
excellent.
And we're at this point we're going after the small stuff like the curvature of the Earth. That'll be fun.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thanks again, and we'll be hopefully speaking soon. Mark Sargent, what did you think of that, Shona?
I think that was absolutely amazing. I love the flat earth and enclosed earth theory. I think that it'll definitely give our listeners something to think about for a little while. So,
yeah, it's thought-provoking. As I said, it's all, all this stuff, it's healthy. You can take or leave it, but I think it's all healthy brain exercising, just sort of challenge yourself of what could be real and what could not be real,
Hey, that's what we're about, free thoughts and open minds.
Exactly. And this was your first show, so everyone give her a round of applause. It was really enjoyable doing it with you. And we'll be back again soon. I do actually think our next show is going to we're going to have David Parry back on. We've got the leader of the UK Libertarian Party coming on the show, and that's very much David's gig. He got that on board, so I'm looking forward to that one. And then we'll be cooking up one together very soon as well, won't we, Shana?
Most definitely.
Okay, well, as usual, we have got some cool names coming up in the pipeline, so keep your ear to the ground. But that's it for this week. We've really enjoyed ourselves again, and we hope you have. Please keep telling your friends about the show, linking the show. And if you're feeling really generous, pop to our website and send us a small donation to help us keep developing the show and keeping at it. But until next time, I think we're going to go now, grab a bite, and we'll be seeing you soon. Bye.
Take care.